Hello, my name is Walter Wimberly, and I'm an assistant professor of computer science. So, this is part of a bigger series where I answer questions that sometimes people ask of me as a college professor. This series within that series is we're looking at the four major types of colleges that you would look at in the United States. Previously, we've looked at the state college system. Now, I would like to look at the state university system. And a lot of times people will sometimes confuse the two because they are very, very similar. I encourage you, if you haven't already seen it, go back and watch the state college system to kind of see what that's about. It's usually 2-year degrees, although some of them start offering 4-year degrees, where the state university system tends to focus on 4-year degrees as well as graduate degrees. Your state university system is often run by a board of regents within the state, and they'll oversee all of the state university systems. Now, this does not mean all the colleges within the state. This is those within that state university system. A lot of times, if you hear where it has a state name in it, you can kind of make that assumption. Things like the University of Florida, University of Georgia, University of Tennessee. Are you starting to see kind of a pattern there? Of course, not all of them are like that, so you can't necessarily hold that true. But your university system does tend to be large. Sometimes these are referred to as land grant universities because the state granted a large chunk of land for them to build a higher education institution on. This was very common in the early colonial days. You don't see too much of that as far as coming up with a brand new university system nowadays. You also don't hear that term a lot, but if you do, that's where it came from. So let's look at some of the pros and cons of the state university system. Well, one big pro that you might see is that a lot of times the state university is very well known. And that's because a lot of times they have sports teams that are associated with them, and they might be really good in one sport or maybe multiple sports. You're going to find that they tend to be large in population, and everyone in the state knows about whatever that state university is. And usually there's a couple, three within the state so that you can go to one that's a little bit closer to you than others. So the advantage is a name recognition, especially if you have a well-known sports team. Now, unfortunately, a great football team does not mean that you're necessarily going to get a great degree in what you're studying. So always look at what your degree is and what your program is. And just because someone's really good in one program doesn't mean they're going to be good in another. As a good example, my wife and I both attended the state university system. She graduated with a communications degree. I graduated with a computer science degree. When I graduated, my school was in the top 3 in the nation and top 10 worldwide in computer science. On the other hand, my wife, on a couple occasions, was denied even being interviewed. And in some cases, she was interviewed and said, we normally don't interview someone from that school. Yes, she went to the same university I did, but its communications program was not held in high regard. She had to work extra hard to get through that, and she did and was successful in her career. So understand that while there are differences, the name recognition will open certain doors that other places may not. The second advantage is that, especially for your second 2 years of school, a state university system is usually cheaper. And I say usually, and that's usually is a very important word in that statement. If you are attending outside of your native state, so let's say that you are from the state of Virginia and you choose to go to a New York State university, you will probably have to pay out-of-state tuition. In paying out-of-state tuition, it will be the same cost as a not-for-profit or even a for-profit university system. You will pay anywhere between 2 to 4 times the amount of a person who lived in the state prior to starting school there. So when I say it's usually cheaper, that is a very important word. So if you are living in a state and you were living there before you started that school, you will usually find it cheaper. Now, the downside, and I mentioned this when talking with the state college system is a lot of times because of the size of the schools, a lot of your classes are larger. I mentioned in one case, one of the schools I was looking at, their Calculus 1 class had 700 people in it. Now, when I transferred into the school, it was the second largest in the state. And you might say, well, how does that matter? Well, I had multiple classes, even if it was just specific to my major, where I might be in a classroom with 200 to 300 or even 400 people. And so when I had that large a number of people, don't think that you're going to get a lot of interaction. You're not going to be able to ask questions in class. You may not have a lab that you can go to and ask questions. You may. It's a very different type of system. And if you're used to going to high school where you had between 25 and 35 students in a classroom, and all of a sudden you get hit with 200, 400 or more, it is a huge, huge difference to what you're used to. Some people have no problem at all with that. Other people have a real difficult time and flounder. The second issue that you might have in going to a school of that size is that it's very easy for you to become a number. And so you don't necessarily know who's going to be a student advisor for you. You just may walk in, they have a variety of student advisors that may or may not do a decent job because they may not know you, they may not know your program, depending upon how the school is set up. So dealing things like with getting to know your instructors, getting good student advising, other things like that is a lot more of a challenge when you go to a state university system. Different universities handle these problems in different ways. I will admit that some of them bury their head in the sand. Others do a great job of handling these problems head on and reworking their systems every few years based upon feedback they get from their students. It just depends upon your university. This is a great time for you to go out and look at that and see, is this where I want to really go? Is this where I want to start? Or is there another option? Now, we've already looked at state colleges. Next up, we're going to look at not-for-profit colleges, and finally, the for-profit colleges. So we're going to look at two more opportunities that you can look at in trying to make your determination.